Thursday, January 14th, 2021 at 7 o'clock. As chairman of the Substandard Living Conditions Special Committee, I find that due to the state of the emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized in pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting via telephone, with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. To access Zoom, please refer to the agenda on the city's website for the meeting link. To join by phone, dial 1-929-205-6099. The meeting ID is 872-1887-4922, and the passcode is 060551. The public may also view the meeting via channel 16. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting through public postings. Instructions have also been provided on the City of Nashua's website at nashuanh.gov and publicly noticed at City Hall and Nashua Public Library. If anyone has a problem accessing the meeting via phone or channel 16, please call 603-821-2049 and they will help you connect. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting via method mentioned above, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call. Please start the meeting by taking roll call attendance. When each member states they're present, please also state whether there's anyone in the room with you during the meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Alderman Jettie, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Jan Schmidt.
I am here and I am alone in the room.
Alderman Ernest Jettie is here. I'm alone and I can hear the proceedings. Alderman Thomas Lopez. Alderwoman Elizabeth Liu.
I'm actually still here. Hello.
Oh, good. I
Okay.
did receive information from Alderman Liu, who is unable to attend today.
Okay, Alderman Lopez, you're here.
Yep, I'm here. I'm not accompanied by anybody in my apartment and I can hear the proceedings.
Okay, and Alderman Skip Cleaver.
Alderman Cleaver said he will be joining us later. He's with a meeting with his ward right now.
Okay.
So we
And,
also have, go ahead, Alderman
and we
Jettie.
also have in attendance Alderman at Large Lori Wilshire.
I'm
And,
here. I am alone and I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. And
Alderman Klee.
Alderwoman Patricia Klee is here, and
I think that's it.
I think Nelson Ortega from the Code Enforcement Agency is also here.
And later on, we hope to see Sarah Marchand, the Community Development Director. This will be the moment for public comment if there is anyone online with us, although I do not believe I see anybody, just us few. So tonight we are adjourning for one of the very first times since this pandemic began. We had hoped to have Heidi Peak with us, the health officer who is going to do a presentation for us. She got very busy and she's not gotten any less busy since this has been going on. So one of the things that we were talking about, especially with Alderman Lopez, was the fire that took place down in the center of the city and the problems that the city had notifying the people who were there and the person who might be responsible, the landlord or someone who works there in the building. And it seems that while we were talking about that, the Sarah Marchand went ahead and took care of it for us. So Mr. Ortega is here tonight to explain to us how the program works, how people can access it if they need to give us that information, and how far along they are on the process. Mr. Ortega?
Yes. Actually, we started this project back in like September, October. We figured we normally have ways of locating a landlord. Sometimes to say or a property manager. Sometimes it takes a little longer. But they've had a few incidents in the city back then that the fire department was unable to reach a property manager or a property owner. And they reached us, and this happens to be two properties that we didn't have any information on, because normally if we don't have contact with a property, we don't have contacts. We normally don't have a contact for a property manager because they're usually properties that are not known to us. Usually the ones we know are ones we come in contact with all the time or we reach out to. But when we get a property that we've never had contact with, we're like, okay, well, this is a new one for us. So we had to figure out a way to, the ordinance has always been there. There's always been an ordinance that says that all landlords, property managers should notify code enforcement with their contact info. And for the most part, we have that for properties, again, that we always come in contact with. But we try to determine, okay, what's the best way, when Sarah and I sat down to talk. And what we did is, I figured we can just do a mass mailing to the city for anyone who's listed with as a property owner or manager. So what we did is I sat down with IT, Jason and IT, and we tried to figure out how can we do this where we know we can kind of narrow it down to who's a property owner and who's a property manager. So we kind of developed several lists, one with what we had pre-existing of contact information, and IT pulled all that information out from from the old CityView, which is our old software we used to have, and then our new software, Civic Gov. So they were able to pull out all this information that gave us lists and the phone numbers and addresses of these particular property managers and property owners. We then also got a list of because we also have a lot of condos that are rentals. Code enforcement, just usually does not have jurisdiction over condominiums, but we do have jurisdiction over condominiums when it's a rental unit. So we were able to get a list of all the condominiums that we have on record through community development, the zoning department, and put that list together. And then what we did is IT sat there and they developed a list of anyone in the city who had 2 units or above. So if you owned a condex and you lived on one side and you rented the other side, we would have that address. And so we sent out, once we got all those mailing lists together, we had to go through each one and it was very cumbersome because it took a good month and a half just to put those lists together. Then we sent out almost 4,000 letters throughout the city. Assessing IT also pulls some of that records through assessing, which is where the software pulls the information from in the first place. So whatever that is on record there got pulled in. So we sent out almost 4,000 letters, each one with 3 notices, 3 sheets of paper in there. One was a letter introducing the ordinance, one was a copy of the ordinance itself, and then one was a form we developed. I sat there and developed a form where the landlords can put their address where the property is, the number of units at the property, then their information, if different from the property that they're renting, because some of them, as you know, don't live in the same buildings. And then all their contact, cell phone information if they wanted to make their cell phone public. Otherwise, they have to put a phone number where someone can reach them. Email addresses, and then the contact of their property manager if they had one, because a lot of owners manage their own properties. But if they had property managers, they listed their information, the property manager's information. It was very informative for us as far as the sheet. And we sent that out. And it was, we got it. I have a box in my office with probably 3,000 letters, forms filled out that we got a good response to it. We also put it up once we got it all together. I posted it on Facebook on Code's website, the same information so people will know. We did try to IT did try to add filters to kind of prevent single family homeowners. Unfortunately, a lot of letters went out to single family homeowners. So we spent a lot of time calling back, 400 or 500 residents in the city, letting them know, because they get this letter saying, hey, we need your information. There's a $50 fine if it doesn't comply with it. And we're like, well, why are we getting these calls? So IT figured out how that happened. So the second batch of mailing, because the first 2,500 letters went out a month, and then the second, 1,500 or so letters went out like 2.5 months later. So we figured it out for the second batch. But people were when we called them back, just the fact that we called them back, they were very grateful that we explained why they ended up getting that letter, and that they didn't have to, that it's not meant for them. If you're a single family owner occupied home, you don't have to fill that form out. If you rent the home, then of course you would have to. And one of the things that IT looked for when they prepared the mailing list for us was, if your address was, let's say 229 Main Street, that your rental, the property, but you had a mailing address out of the city somewhere else, then you got looped into that mailing packet because you own a property here, but it says your mailing address is in Concord. So those got looped in. So that's how we ended up being able to find out single family homes that are also being rented in the city. So we now have single family homes. We have the same situation happen with condominiums. So we now have a lot of condos that are rentals, even some that we didn't know, because again, we never have contact with them because they're condominiums. The association deals with their problems, unless it's a rental and the tenant felt that they weren't getting any assistance from an association or from the owner. So we have condo owners now. We have single family homeowners that are rental units. Obviously, the multifamily rental units we have, and then we have the small ones, the condex, the single family, two homes. And the owner lives on one side, they rent the other. And usually we don't have many problems with those type of homes where the owner lives right next door, and then the one next door is a rental. So it was a big undertaking just putting that together. We finally got everything out. We got a very good response by mail, but we also got an even bigger response online, because you have the choice when you got the mailing, you had a choice of filling out the form, the physical form, or going onto our website, code enforcement website, because we have a link there just specifically just for code enforcement emergency information contact. So they click on that and it actually opens up the form that they get in the mail. So they were able to fill it in online, so they didn't have to worry about mailing anything. So we have we have about 300 on the computer that we need to figure out a date to start inputting that in, transferring it over from the computer into the actual Civic Gov program, which is where code enforcement goes to put in complaints or any contact that we may have with anyone, that's where we go to put in the information. So the goal is that once we have that all transferred into CivicGov, anyone who, when we click on the contact section, it will automatically show all the contact information for the property owner, the property managers, their phone numbers, and email address if they give one. Once we have it all in our system of CivicGov and it's inputted, and it's going to take every code officer, and we have a couple of individuals that are going to help out in inputting that information. Then the goal is for IT to try and not try. They said they can give access to fire department and police department. So they'll have live access to code enforcement's site, where they can get their dispatch can actually sit there and just type in the address, the contact information, and it'll if they don't have it, they'll be able to go to our website and say, okay, this, and I'm talking more for after hours situations. They can go in there and say, okay, this is a contact information for 229 Main Street, and they will see live exactly what we would see if they called us at 1 in the morning or midnight or anytime after 5 o'clock. But it should work. We have a good feeling. So far, it's working great with getting all the information. Obviously, it'll be fine putting in all the information. Time consuming, but it'll work. And I think that the health department will also, the goal is for health, fire, and police to have access to that information. And we kind of have a target date of mid-May, to have everything inputted into our CivicGov website software. And then once we get it put in there, then IT can go from there and do what they do to give access to police, fire, and health. So that's kind of the gist of what we came up with. Again, we got a lot of phone calls, a lot of people. We have people who are actually calling and saying, Nelson, I got the mail back. I don't know what happened, but we're concerned. And I said, no, just put it to my attention and mail it again, or drop it off in the Dropbox, and we should get it. But I was just very impressed the first month how we just got so many forms filled out. Again, I have a huge box with there's got to be at least 2,500 letters in there, forms that we now have to put into the system.
It sounds huge. Thank you. Does anyone, any of the aldermen, have a question they'd like to ask Mr. Ortega? Yes, Madam President.
Thank you. Nelson, what a great undertaking. I mean, this really can help you guys and whoever needs to access that information. That's huge. I mean, good for you and good for Community Development Division for taking that step, and I'm so impressed with the number of respondents, because typically when you send something like that out, you get dribs and drabs back, but not as many as you seem to have gotten. So good for you. Good work.
No, we did get a huge response. Another thing that I noticed in going through some of the mail and some of the ones that I get online is I noticed that there were quite a few single family homeowners who actually filled out the form. Instead of calling us, they just said, no, I'm going to fill this out and send it. Because they were concerned. We did let people know that there is a fine there, but we let them know that there's a fine because the ordinance calls for it. So we wanted to know that, hey, this is the outcome. Obviously, we're not going to pursue that until everything's in the system and everything, and then we can tell who didn't do it, and then we'd give them an opportunity to do it. Because with all the mailings we've done, there's always still that chance that a few slip through the cracks. So,
Sure.
But I think we'll be able to figure those out as it goes on. So what I was trying to say is when we look at the forms, we can see that if the form says number of units 1, and then the person's name is Nelson Ortega, and the mailing address for that unit is the same address that Nelson Ortega has, we're like, okay, this is a single family home. We can tell because they're living in the same one unit. So what we've done with a couple of them, we've called them up and say, hey, you filled out this form? And they're like, yes, we did. And we let them know, I said, just so you know, we're going to take your address off the list because you're a single family home owner occupied. You don't have to give us your information. We actually had one lady say, you know what, why don't you keep it just in case, because you just never know if I'm not home. It won't help us if she's not home, but
Well, it made her feel safe, and then that's kind of a good thing too, right?
Yes.
I have been getting calls, and we have a list. I keep a running list. Probably have about 95 on that list of individuals who have called and says, hey, I own this home, I live here. This is not a rental. So we are keeping a list of those people because they don't want to be on the list, and you know, they shouldn't have to be if they're not rental units. This is meant for landlords and property managers. So we have those lists this list that we now have to go through later on and pull them out of that pool. So they'll know that, okay, we've told them we're going to remove them, and rightfully so we should. So we will. So it is, you know, we added a little work to it, but we like how it's working so far. The response.
It sounds like it's working well, and it's going to work for you in the
Yes.
future. You know, once you get through the pile of, you know,
Yeah.
initial responses. But good for you.
I think it'll work out for the fire. I think it'll work out for the PD if they ever need to reach out to somebody for whether during hours or after hours. But the main thing was really we need to find a way to get a hold of somebody after hours, and also let these individuals that don't live in Nashua who have properties know that, hey, if you don't live within 25 miles, and we've had several of those. There was one woman out of California who didn't want to. I was a draconian leader for some reason, and I shouldn't, because she felt she didn't have to fill it out. But if you live further than 25 miles from your property, you are required to have someone within 25 miles who can be reached for an emergency. So we had quite a few of those, and people didn't. A lot of individuals, homeowners, property owners, don't know that ordinance is there. So we have to educate them, and that's basically what this mailing did. It really did educate a lot of property owners who have never had contact with code enforcement, some who didn't even know we were there.
Follow up.
Yes, please.
How long has that ordinance been around? Because I know I've been around for a while. I know that 20 years ago it was talked about, but I think it had been let go even prior to that. So do you know when the ordinance was passed?
I've been here 23 years, and it's been there since I started.
Okay.
It is just something that no one ever really looked at, I think, because I've been telling people that way back in the day before I even became manager. I says, yeah, you don't live within 25 miles. It was a $25 fine at the time. So it's been there. It's just something that I think people, you know, it might have not been there before, you know, back then, but somehow it's in there.
Well, kudos to you for making good on it. That's awesome.
We're trying to make it work right.
Anything else, Alderman Wilshire? Nope. Anybody else have a question they'd like to ask? Yes, Alderman Lopez.
So when we were tackling this back in September, or at least I was tackling it with the city departments, we had talked about the need for a tool because basically that information wasn't available immediately. Who was in the building, who was being relocated, and how do we make sure they have the supports? Another extension of that was which city department was responsible for doing that. Whether it was someone needs to call city welfare up and have them start making outreach calls, or whether that was part of the emergency management team's response, whether that was being managed by the fire department because they were the ones declaring occupancy, or whether it was done by the Red Cross. So Nelson, can you give me clarification on, in an after hours situation, who takes the lead on making sure all residents are contacted, are placed, and are being followed up on?
The best way for me to explain it is if it is a fire, my understanding is that it is whenever the fire department shows up, it's their game. But whenever there's a fire, the Red Cross is responsible for trying to assist anyone who's being displaced because of a fire. Um, uh, Code enforcement in the past, if something happened in a home that caused a particular, there's nothing that says they can be forced to place them. But when we have a home that a person is displaced because of something that was done without the required documents, like if someone did some gas work without the proper permits or without the professionals who are required to do gas work, then if they reach out to us, then we go to the landlords and say, look, you're the one that this particular situation happened because this installation was done improperly. Um, uh, we would think that you would do what you can to help this tenant out until you can resolve that problem. And that has worked for us, but only when it's something, code enforcement usually is involved when it's something that might have been the cause of a landlord who did something inappropriately or did it illegally. But if it's a natural occurrence, it's usually for natural occurrences, it's usually the Red Cross gets called to assist, and that's we're normally notified just to see if we have a contact information of this landlord or of this property manager. So that's usually the extent.
And to Mr. Nelson's point, one of the things that I brought up back in September was that it was being brought to my attention not only with the issue that we had on the building on Main Street, but also the one we had at the Layton House, that there are gaps in the protections for tenants and the obligations of landlords to house them if they are displaced. So while there's the assumption by many that in the event that a unit is uninhabitable, the landlord will then provide a place for them to stay until it's habitable again, that's not entirely and in every case true, and we don't have a city ordinance making that the case. Can you confirm that to your knowledge, Mr. Nelson?
Whenever we deal with a property that has multiple units, if a unit is displaced, that within that building, I've always had landlords who do have other units offer units to tenants when they have other places to go. As far as forcing them to put them up, that's a whole topic that would probably need to be. It would involve legal. It would involve division directors to come up with, because for me to sit here and answer that particular question on my own is above my pay scale.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to ask you to give a specific opinion on that process. I had actually emailed Alderman Schmidt about that as one of the discussion topics that we should talk about as aldermen, because there is that legislative element that's missing. In terms of the city's strategy, that's where Director Marchant would have been helpful to have, because we sort of need to know how these emergencies are responded to. But there is essentially the potential that a larger unit or a larger multi-unit building could become uninhabitable due to fire, structural damage, issues with ventilation or whatever. And then we would have nobody responsible for where those residents are placed if that whole unit is uninhabitable. So there is definitely some need for additional work by this committee. And I appreciate the fact that we at least now we have a collection of the names. It seems like the next step before planning for disasters of, dozens or so units being taken offline right away is we should probably nail down someone in the city who's responsible for making sure these are done in all cases, because the way the incident command structure flows is whichever department is taking the lead takes the lead. And unfortunately, that means that the tenants don't always know, especially if they weren't on scene when the incident happens, whether they're supposed to be following up with the police, whether they're supposed to follow up with fire, or whether there's a nonprofit looking to find them. So there's still some gaps in our emergency response system that we should look at, because people don't have a lot of disposable income when they're living in lower income housing situations. They can't always go to a motel or hotel and wait until the weekend is over and then try to figure it out on Monday.
Anything else, Alderman Lopez?
Nope.
Alderman Jettie, did I see you have your hand up?
Yes, please, thank you. So, Mr. Ortega, what is the, I know that there's a law that requires, landlords who are not, present on the property to register their contact information with, I think it's the city clerk's office. What, is that an ordinance or a state law?
That's what that is. That's a state law for property owners to register their registered agents for service. So if someone wants to know who the registered agent is, whether it's the owner himself or an actual registered agent or an attorney, then that's what the city clerk keeps. If someone wants to serve papers on that particular property, that's a state law. When they first issued that law, it came with $1,000 fine, and they've since rescinded. And like maybe 4 or 5 months after that, they forego the fine because what we were doing in what we did in Nashua is when Trish was here, we combined that form that city clerk had. We combined it and we put hours on the back, so it was a two-sided form. So they would do the front part, which was the registered agent for the city clerk to keep records of. And then the back part was the emergency contact information, which code enforcement would do. So what we were doing back then is city clerk's office would document their portions, whichever way they did that. And then they would inter-office us the forms, and then we had the other side, and we would put it into our system, and vice versa when we got the forms first. So we shared back and forth. But that was an RSA, which was strictly for the registered agents, requirements of registered agent information for proper service.
Okay, and so that registered agent wouldn't necessarily be the contact person in case of an emergency.
Correct.
Right.
We've on occasions have called a contact agent, a registered agent, and though they can't help us, what they in turn have said, you know what, we can't help you, but you know what, we'll send an email or we'll call our client. And they didn't have to, but they did, and it worked out. It worked out fine. But their purpose is strictly for proper service.
Okay. And so, in addition to that state law regarding
Service.
Registered agents, we have an ordinance that requires that the owner of the property provide us with contact information or not.
Correct.
And what ordinance is that?
Sure. Now I got to look for it because I don't have my tag book at home. But it's part of 182, and it is, that's 40. Just give me a sec. Because they're required to post it. That was an Alderman, part of when Alderman Clemens put an ordinance together for contact information for the tenants. Determination form. It's 182.31.
Okay, and
NRO 182.31.
okay, let me just. And so, do you have it right there in front of you?
I do at the moment. It's titled Emergency and Code Enforcement Department Information.
Okay, so I'm looking at it now, and this says all dwellings which are let or in which one or more units are let to another for occupancy shall have posted in a regularly accessible common area
Mhm.
written notification concerning the following. Okay. And so my concern is that, even in spite of this ordinance being in effect for some period of time, apparently, uh, people didn't know about this, or it wasn't being kept up with. And so I'm thinking, what do you need anything from us? Any additional legislation to help you, identify who these people are, who these units are, and anything additional to require them to, you know,
Um,
does this, looking at this ordinance quickly, it talks about posting it in a readily accessible place. I'm assuming that's for
Landlord.
tenants and emergency personnel to be able to contact them. But your office itself, is there any requirement that they register that information with your office, for example?
That that is what we just did with the mailing. That information that they need to either post their information in a public place where the tenants can see it, and or provide that tenant at the time that they sign a lease their information so they can always be in contact with them. It breaks that down further down into the ordinance as one method. But for us, uh, with this big exercise we just did and put together, until we're really finished with it and have it in place, um, I can't think of anything at the moment, uh, excluding anything that Alderman Lopez is talking about, but just specifically the contact information. Um, until we actually get everything up and running totally sometime in May and see how it goes, and we have access for the fire and police. Um, I have to say, at the moment, it looks like we're, because we're just making ordinances that were in there. Uh, a lot of individuals didn't know that because we've never come in contact with them. And when we do reach out to people who've never dealt with code or heard, they're surprised when we tell them, oh, you need to have a property manager within 25 miles, or you need to have your information posted with us. So usually when we do it that way, people do respond and they get it to us. But we have over 18,000 rental units in the city. And we don't come in contact with every single one of them. Uh, you have a lot of responsible homeowners out there also. So that's when we don't reach out to them because we've never had a reason to. Now with this mailing, we've not only reached out to the ones we deal with on a regular basis, but all the ones that we've never come in contact with. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of responses from people, including the ones that we come in contact with. Um, so at the moment, I have to say, I just have to wait till see how things end up when we finish this complete exercise.
The my concern is, I know you have a limited amount of resources, a limited amount of people, and since I've become an alderman, I've often heard the response that you are a complaint-driven agency.
Yeah.
You don't have the time or the resources or the personnel, to go, finding things. You depend upon people complaining about violations before it's called to your attention, and that, you can follow through and enforce the law. On this issue, I'm trying to see whether or not, um, there's something that would, alleviate, your burden by, putting it onto the property owner. If the property owner is renting out property, that somehow they be alerted, that they be informed that they have a duty to provide this information. And right now, I suspect that there are a lot of property owners who become a landlord without really realizing what that they have this additional obligation. And I'm trying to think of whether there's some way to to make that happen, so that when they become a landlord, that they gain the information that they have certain duties, uh, registering with the city clerk and registering with your office and maybe even the fire department or the police department, so that their contact information is available to us without our having to learn about their not having done this by accident, fire or some other type of emergency occurring.
No, I mean, that makes sense. That has come up throughout the years. That has come up as a topic every now and then about what's a good way to let people who've never been landlords, who all of a sudden are landlords, know that, hey, they have to do this, they should do this and that. And it is coming up with some sort of educational tool to help these individuals, whether it's during the time that they purchase a multifamily building and you'll also have landlords who we found that they'll sell their building and never inform the new owners that, oh, by the way, code enforcement exists. That's always come up throughout my years here. That's come up every so many times a year that has come up, and we're like, well, we're not. We always do say that we're not a pro. We don't have the ability to be a proactive agency, but we do have those opportunities here and there where if we're out somewhere, we're just not gonna go by and ignore 3 other houses that we've seen. This COVID time has been one of the things that code enforcement have been able to do more driving around because you're not making contact with individuals, and so you get to drive and see more. So but it is a true comment that we are more reactive than we are proactive because of the number of complaints that we get in on a regular basis. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that it, Alderman Jettie?
Yep. Thank you very much.
Alderman Wilshire had a question next.
Thank you. Not so much a question as an experience. 20 years ago, when I first got on the board, we had a lot of drug issues, areas that were dense and, a lot of people living there. And we had talked about finding landlords who kept renting to people who were dealing drugs in their units. I mean, we had a couple of really high use homes, and trying to contact landlords was near impossible. I mean, we had one on Mason Street that for years and years, wow, that was, and other areas too, but we had talked about trying to find landlords who were absent, and people that kept getting arrested in their apartments for drug dealing. So I know we talked about this way back then. So I think that kind of thing has maybe smoothed out a little bit, but we did have the issue, of not being able to contact landlords when their tenants kept getting arrested. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Alderman Lopez had another question.
I'm just curious, does code enforcement, or I mean, particularly your guys that are out driving around and checking things out, do you guys coordinate with the assessing department? Because I feel like they're also out and about and doing things.
No, when code enforcement goes out, our problem, we work closely with fire, police, health department, assessing if we need if one of the code officers runs into a problem with property, what they have done, I should say we work with assessing on many occasions, because the code officers will reach out to assessing and say, hey, because they have access to mortgages and deeds and so forth. So assessing has been good. When we call them or reach out to them, they'll research a property for us, and they'll actually find out who the mortgage holder is. And we will reach out to them if a property needs to be shut down, or if a property is like right now we have a property 61 Arlington. The person abandoned the property, and they moved out west somewhere. So there's nothing much we can do about that. But what the code officer in charge of that case did is he reached out to assessing, who in turn researched the records and found who the mortgage holder is, who then we in turn reached out to the mortgage holder and say, hey, this property's been abandoned. What are we going to do about it? And that's usually how we handle. We work closely with assessing when it comes to records that we can find.
So I underestimated you for a second there when you actually named that address. I was like, oh God. And then you were like, but they abandoned it. And I was like, oh, phew, okay. I was just thinking more in terms of like maybe giving them a refresher course, and like, these are things we look for when we drive around, just in case they happen to see something like, you know, a window shutter hanging off or something like that. I mean, you never know. They're out there too. Their eyes on the ground.
Assessing is when it comes to that, assessors, we always get emails from them saying, hey, we were here and we noticed that there's something that shouldn't be there right now, or wasn't there the last time, or that if they have something that they don't see a permit for themselves, and they'll reach out to building or code enforcement. So we do have that relationship with them also. They'll go into a unit, into a property, and though their job is to assess and determine, if they see something that just is too, they just can't let it sit there, they will notify us that, hey, this appears to be this could be a hoarding situation, or this can be there's a lot of damage in this unit, because they're there to evaluate it, and they're what they see determines the value. So yeah, so they have that. Those are things that the individual assessors, when they go out themselves, we'll get an email from them here and there.
I would imagine that you probably also do a little bit of like cross training with police or fire, because it's also more. So I think what I was kind of getting at was, it's not just you and your team that are out looking at stuff. There's a lot of city attention to this issue, but the enforcement part of it is complaint driven. So you're not exactly looking for trouble. If you see places where people are going to need guidance, then you'll provide it. For inspections, usually there has to be something initiating that inspection.
Yes, yeah, especially if it's internally in someone's unit.
Okay.
We need in order to inspect someone's unit, we need a complaint to be made for within that unit, and then we need permission from that tenant and or the landlord or both to inspect it.
I can say firsthand, I'm surprised at what people have gotten used to in, that over the many years of doing outreach work or other community-based things. Like I will find people with buckets in their living room and say, oh yeah, that's where the leak is. Or, they'll have electrical work that doesn't work, and they'll have like all of their stuff's like Christmas tree on one side. And you got to look at that and be like, what are you doing, man? If half of your electricity in your living room doesn't work, you should not have extension cords running on the other one. But people get used to that kind of stuff, and I think everybody benefits from having that stuff looked at and made sure that it's still in good operational condition.
Yeah. No.
Hopefully, right now, one of the tiny side effects of the COVID-19 outbreak is people are thinking a little bit more about their airflow and their air filters, because that's another thing too. Is some people have really nasty, like clogged airflow, and they're breathing that in all the time. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. I think that the database for keeping track of what tenants are where and hopefully keeping them somewhat up to date is definitely going to be helpful. I just think that there's probably some departmental work to do in terms of deciding internally how they're going to respond to crises. And that might come to the aldermen in terms of like budgeting, where we might have to say like we are allowing for an after hours budget. It might just be that the mayor has to figure out what order that goes in. But I think ultimately what I would like to see, and I think a lot of constituents would agree, is in a crisis, people having a clear path of where to go for information and then direction. Even if it's just an automated voicemail that says, if you're living at blah, 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 and you've been dislocated, contact your landlord at blah, 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 or we're moving you to blah, whatever. So there's a lot of solutions that can be had. I just think this is definitely an area we should be looking at before something worse happens.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Anyone else have another question that they'd like? Yes,
Yeah.
Alderman Jettie.
So, anyway, probably a lot of people probably won't, like me saying this, but yeah, I think that what a lot of other cities do is they require that this kind of information be registered with the city, some central information gathering place, whether it's code enforcement or the city clerk's office or the building department or police, fire, whatever. One of the objections, I kind of heard a little hint of an objection, is this stuff costs money. The mere fact that someone has to assemble this information and if we require this to enforce it, and what a lot of other cities, I'm thinking I know Manchester in particular, and I think Concord as well. They require landlords to register and to pay a fee, an annual fee, to the city, which I'm not. I think Manchester does it. I think the fee is substantial enough that it actually raises revenue. I'm not sure about Concord's fee, but the idea that I don't think it's unreasonable for us to consider maintaining this type of information for the protection of of our citizens, the tenants, and I think it's also a benefit to the landlords. That they, if something happens, that they know that that they will be notified, and so that they can take action to protect their property and to lessen whatever damage might occur.
If I might, I had talked to Heidi Peak about this, the health officer. I talked about this. We were discussing a problem with bed bugs. And she said this was attempted previously in the city and it was not accepted by the administration, that it was a bad idea. Maybe that's something that we need to talk about again. Maybe that's something that we should discuss. Because I think you're right. I think even a small fee, just enough so that we know that they're there and we have an option to get to them, and we know they're there. So I think we should talk about that. And thank you for bringing it up, Alderman Jettie. Did you have a follow-up?
No, I guess my only follow-up is that I guess we when I say we, I guess that means me or I should explore this with, you know, the city administration about, you know, possibly, you know, bringing forth some legislation uh, to start the discussion and see where it goes.
Yep, I think that's a great idea. Um, anyone? Yes, Mr. Ortega?
I wanted to clarify something about that fee. Um, I don't believe Concord does have that in place. I knew the code administrator really well, and I don't think he's no longer there right now, but I don't think Concord does. But the fee that Manchester has comes with an inspection of every rental unit when they're going to rent a unit.
Right.
And that's a study that was done years ago and found it could not be done with the number of code officers we had in compared to the number of rental units that there were. There was a big committee and a big study done years ago when Laura Gaines used to be the manager, and all the research between assessing and her and communication between Manchester and how they function. They have a very large and different code setup in Manchester than we do. So being able to collect the fee and do the inspection, they called it, it's part of a certification that they have. And the city of Nashua just had not been able to do that with 3 code officers. It was determined back then that for the size of rental units that we had to try and do a fee, which came with an inspection. They don't just collect the fee every year. They also inspect the units, and every time a unit becomes vacant, then they're supposed to notify their code officers, and their code officers will go back out and inspect the unit and charge a fee. We couldn't do that because at the time it was determined that city would need about 10 code officers just to be able to do that type of a program. So you can imagine today. But that's the fee. That's what Manchester does. That's how they collect that fee.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? Nope. Alderman Jettie, I'd just like to tell you that Alderman Cleaver arrived at 7:13. If you'd like to note that on our agenda. I do have just a couple of questions. I was wondering, what was the percentage you think that you've received back from these requests?
Are we talking about the notices that went out?
Yes. How many you think? What the percentage of returns?
I think just based on what I'm seeing and you get ready to put in between the electronic ones and the mail-in ones, I gotta have over 75%.
That's stupendous.
Yeah, I gotta have, because each one of those, there's some landlords who filled out, if they have to do it for every property they have. So I know that I have some that have one envelope with 20 forms in it, another envelope with 30 forms in it. But I think I can confidently say we have just with what I've seen and not having been at my office to look at my desk, my code office keeps saying, we put your mail on your desk, and I know what that means. So there's got to be at least a good 75% response.
Terrific. Thank you. Also, how about the accessory dwelling units? Are those considered rentals, and would they be included in this?
When you say accessory dwelling units,
The ADUs, somebody has a house, they put an ADU on the side for grandma or for rental or something like that.
What used to be called the in-law apartments.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, they don't call them in-law apartments anymore. The state changed that. If Sarah were here, she'd be able to explain that part a little better because she knows that one.
Okay.
Her plan is still to be around here if depending on how long this goes, but she's just stuck at another meeting.
Yeah.
If it's a living unit and it's rented, yes, it counts. It
Okay.
counts. If
Thank
you
you.
collect money for it, then it's a rental unit.
I like that. That works. So I think maybe we should meet again next month perhaps Director Marchand can be with us and answer those other tricky questions that we don't have. And perhaps we'd also like to talk to Director Cates to just ask a couple of questions about what happens if it's not the fire department and the Red Cross, if there's an emergency, what the process is, and who would be calling you. Would they have access to the information? So perhaps we can do that next time. Yes, Alderman Lopez.
Can I suggest that we ask the Red Cross to attend as well? Because
Oh.
a lot of this relies on them. So it would be a good time for them to talk about the services they do, need for volunteers and all that. And
Yep.
then B, I mean, they are a part of the process. So
Yep, sounds like a good idea to me. Any other ideas? Alderman Jettie, you look like you wanted to say something.
You're such a mind reader. I was, while we're inviting people, I'm wondering if the, I know there's a landlord association in the city.
No, they've disbanded.
What's that?
They've disbanded. They no longer is a national landlord
Oh.
association.
There's no longer a landlord association?
Correct. Judy Nessett
They'll
was
be back as soon as
Judy
you
Nessett was the last president of the association.
Okay, so I'm just wondering if there's someone from the landlord community that would like to give us some insight about their point of view on I'm thinking that providing contact information would be something that they would welcome, that they would like to be contacted if something happens. So I'm just, but I don't really know. So I'm just wondering whether whether we should seek out their point of view while we're considering these things.
Let's think about Alderman Lopez.
I was just going to say, I can ask the landlord of 243 since she has recent experience. And she probably has some pretty good insights as to the challenges that she encountered. But it's obviously a sensitive topic for any landlord to face. So if you want, I can try to get a landlord of some kind of multi-unit buildings.
I think that would be beneficial. Yeah.
I know I know some attorneys who represent landlords, and I'm wondering if either they or they could provide a contact. So I'll be happy to follow up there
Yep.
as well.
That'd be helpful.
Attorney Mayer used to be the attorney for the landlord association. Fred Mayer.
Yes.
Oh, Fred
He-
Mayer, yeah.
I was thinking of him, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. He's our go-to.
He's still around, huh? Fred Mayer?
As far as I know, he is.
Nice.
Wait,
That
so
would be great.
his last name is Mayor, but he's not the mayor?
That's right.
Mr. Mayor. Okay. Anything else for Mr. Ortega before we let him go? Thank you so much, sir, for this and for doing the work you're doing to bring this together for us. I we didn't even know we needed it until we needed it, and now it's going to be there for us. So we're very, very grateful. Think about what Alderman Jettie suggested. If there is something you feel that you need on the books, please let us know. That's more or less what we're there for, and we'll support you in anything you feel you desperately need to turn into law. Thank you for your time tonight, and for your 23 years of service to the city, and the knowledge base that you have for us. It's very much appreciated.
I appreciated being here. It's always good to be able to explain to individuals what's going on and how things are being done. So it was a good platform to fill you guys in.
Oh, could I ask a favor? The documents that you send out, would you send a copy, electronic copy to Donna for us, so that we'd have an idea of what, if we ever get a call from one of the landlords in our wards that says, "What's this all about?" We'll have more than just a cursory knowledge of it. That'd be really terrific. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
I can do that because a lot of people were calling the mayor's office saying, "What is this all about?" So, so we have to explain it to them. So no, that'll be fine. I can send Donna that.
That'd be super. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much
Okay.
for having me, and anytime, just give a holler. All right.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thank you. Good night. Good night.
ladies.
Good night.
Okay, so we use this time for public comment, which I don't see anyone is here. It looks like it's just us. So we'll move on to remarks by the alderman. Yes, Alderman Wilshire.
Hi, thank you. That was a great meeting. I think, what they're doing is going to be very helpful for the city, for, fire, whoever needs it. I think it's really long overdue. It's just not one of those things that comes up, but now that it's here, I think it's a
Yes.
really, really valuable process to go through. So appreciate what community development has been doing.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Alderman Lopez.
Some good news. In working with Director Bagley, we have managed to get the high fives to meet. So the point in time count is on January 29th, and we did get the state to approve a vaccination for homeless people. So we're working out, or a vaccination clinic for homeless. So we're working out a location downtown, the logistics of having public health put that on. It should be really helpful in not only making sure that we have transitional elements within our community that are interacting with many different types of housing situations, get access to preventative health care, but we can start counting the real number of homeless people and understanding the true scope of the problem in Nashua. So I just wanted to give Director Bagley, a huge thumbs up for being able to negotiate that with the state on such short notice. Now we got to do is make it work.
We got to make a lot of things work, and we can do it. We can do it. I wanted to thank you, Alderman Lopez. If it wasn't for you and the suggestion that we get this started, I don't think it would have happened. This database is going to make a huge difference, and in one way, it will help all the landlords know that we are here, and if they need us, we have the information they need. I'm sorry I took anybody else. Anybody else have something they'd like to? Yes, welcome, Alderman Cleaver.
Thank you, and I apologize for being late. I had a Ward 8 meeting with the mayor, so I left it early, and so I tried to split my time. I'm sorry. But I did come across one piece of information, and that the governor has announced that beginning January 22nd, anybody 65 and over can sign up for their shot, for their vaccine. And how long it's going to take to fulfill that list and complete that, I don't know. But beginning on the 22nd, at least, we'll have some idea.
Excellent. That's great news. Yes, Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I want to add to what Alderman Cleaver just said. I actually was on the website and sending it out to my constituents. There's also a checklist where you can answer questions that it tells you what category you fall into. If you fall into 1B, just what Alderman Cleaver said, it does say that starting January 22nd, you can register, and that they would begin doing the vaccines on or about January 26th. So it's not gonna, you don't get 22nd, it's gonna take a little while to do that. And I'm sure they would be able to schedule you, and you're supposed to be able to schedule that. But the phase checklist really is a good thing. And if you go to the nh.gov/COVID, you'll be able to see vaccine checklist. It's off on the right-hand side. They call it that you just literally the phase checklist. You just do that, answer a few questions. I did it to find out what category I'd be in. I did it to find out what category my husband would be in. And the documentation that shows all the phases still says greater than or equal to 75. But as Alderman Cleaver mentioned, he did change it to 65, which was questioned whether or not he was going to do that. So the phase checklist shows that, but the little 3-column phases still says 75 or older. So just so people aren't confused, it is 65 and above. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Alderman Jettie, did you have something you'd like to say?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
All set. You're welcome. I just wanted to say, anybody who's as confused as I am about when the vaccine's really going to happen, if they have any questions, when, what category they're in, what they have to have as far as proof, please call 211. There are people manning those phone numbers, personing those phone numbers to ensure that everybody has the right information. And they're there for you, as far as I know, 24/7. Anything else? We don't have any possible non-public session to do. So I would ask our clerk if you'd like to adjourn us.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that the Substandard Living Conditions meeting, special committee meeting of January 14th be adjourned by roll call.
And the roll call, please.
Alderman Jan Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie votes yes. Alderman Lopez,
No.
Sorry.
Democracy.
Alderman Cleaver.
Yes.
So it's 1, 2, 3 to 3 to 1. The ayes have it.
Thank you very much. The meeting is declared closed at 8:12, and I can't thank you folks enough for your patience in doing this. I'll see you next month if everything works out and we get the people that will answer some questions for us. Thanks so much.